The world has become a shrieking carnival of unease. I'm tuning this battered transmitter from inside what used to be the East Ridge Broadcast Tower, though tower feels like a luxury of language now. From here, I can see the horizon alive, with motion, a dark, seething veil of insects stretching farther than the eye can follow. Once, this region was thick with pines and aspens, gray-green needles whispering in mountain breezes. Now, the forests are skeletal husks. The bark is dry and splintered, the trunks blackened by last summer's fires, and the ground is a cracked network of fissures that moan with every footstep. Rivers have shrunk to rivulets of sludge half mud, half ash clinging to the last pockets of algae and koi farms long since devoured by drought. The air tastes of rust and rot. Every breath brings a cough, and every cough reminds you that your lungs are not as tough as you once thought. The insects arrived first in millions, then billions. It started as a tremor beneath the earth, a collective skittering that no human ear was meant to hear. I remember standing on these same ridges, binoculars trained on the valley below, expecting a storm. But the storm was silent, a living avalanche that settled over fields and towns alike. Crops wilted beneath the weight of twitching bodies. Power lines hummed with short circuits as thousands of beetles swarmed the pylons. Electricity blinked off in the nearest city and never came back. Government measures collapsed under the sheer scale of it. Emergency services, so proud in their uniforms, were overwhelmed within days. The National Guard retreated to fortified bases, leaving towns like mine to fend for themselves. Now, the only institutions that survive are pockets of scavengers and ragtag survivor groups, each establishing their own codes, some more brutal than others. Supply caches are raided at night, and even the simplest exchange of food for fuel can end with a barrel pointed at the trader's chest if trust falters. No one remembers when broadcast towers officially fell silent, but every now and then I catch a fragment of a frequency, static, laced with distant screams or empty pleas for help. I patch it into this channel in the hope someone, somewhere, is still listening. Maybe they'll know if there's a place beyond these mountains where the insects haven't yet claimed the sky. At dawn, the clouds above bleed a sickly gold / there's no sun to speak of, only a dim furnace trapped in a haze of chemical pollutants and swirling kittens. Mornings are the worst. The silence settles first, pressing against your eardrums, and then the swarm emerges in waves, so vast it seems the world is giving birth to something monstrous. Their wings hum in perfect unison, a static drone that vibrates the air and rattles your bones. What once was farmland is now a patchwork of rusted tractors, half buried in dust. Irrigation canals have turned into death traps, channels of water, so stagnant they're alive with algae blooms and drowned. Carcasses of anything unfortunate enough to drink. I avoid them on foot. Even at a distance, the smell can turn your stomach inside out. Survivor camps huddle among the ruins of gas stations and shuttered motels. Tarps and corrugated steel form crude walls, and watchtowers built from scavenged telephone poles peer into the emptiness. Here, water is traded ounce for ounce, and food is counted in calories rather than servings. Everyone carries a vial of antiseptic and a pack of ruts. Bar's nutrient paste that tastes like sawdust but keeps you from collapsing. Overhead, the insects cast moving shadows that crawl across broken pavement and gouged asphalt. They hunt in swarms, seeking anything alive, small animals, humans, swarms, mandibles. It's rumored that some people have found refuge in underground bunkers, living off hydroponic gardens and scavenged batteries, retelling less reliable than the last. In this fractured world, the line between night and day matters little. The swarm never sleeps. Their nocturnal, globioluminescent carapaces light. Some nights, I wonder if I'm imagining constellations of beetle lights rather than stars, if the sky will ever be ours again. Concrete, a single sunflower stubbornly peeks through a fissure in the road. In the rusted shell of a pickup truck, I once found a tattered paperback. The cover read "The End of the World," a field guide. The pages were waterlogged, but I swear, I saw a note scratched on the inside cover reading, "Keep going, hope survives." I clipped that page and carried it here, taped above my microphone, as a reminder that even if we're down to whispers and paper scraps, our desire to endure outlives the collapse. This is the world I describe to you now, a burned-out wilderness, haunted by chittering swarms, where every day is measured in survival, and every night tested by the low hum of chitinous wings. Yet beyond the static, beyond the haze, I hold on to a single thought. Somewhere out there, the sun still rises over untouched land. And until we find that horizon, we'll keep talking, keep listening, keep surviving. I flip the dial on this battered transmitter and imagine you leaning in close. Because what I'm about to describe isn't a it's the world as it stands now. The sky hasn't known blue in a decade. Instead, it hangs above us in an unending haze of ochre and ash, a rotting bruise that pulses with each season's new catastrophe. Summers scorch everything within sight until the land cracks open like an old wound. Winters freeze what little remains, coating the ruins of cities in frost that never fully melts. Some years, the rains come in, vomits monsoon spells that turn roads into rivers of mud and debris, swallowing entire neighborhoods in hours. Rage across the plains with a ferocity we can scarcely comprehend. They leap from tree to tree, engulfing what was once the great northern timber reserve in a matter of hours. Wooden husks smolder for weeks, and the air tastes of burnt resin and regret. You can drive for miles along what used to be Highway 17 and see nothing but blackened stumps jutting from the ash like broken teeth. The nearest survivor camp burns scented candles indoors, not for comfort, but to mask the ever-present stench of char. Rivers have either drowned the cities or abandoned them. The Mississippi, once a mighty artery, now alternates between a shallow trickle and violent flash floods that rip bridges from their piers. In the east, storm surge from supercharged hurricanes swallowed entire coastal towns, leaving behind skeletons of strip malls and rusting yachts. Inland, lakes have evaporated entirely salt flats where fishing boats lie like beached whales, drawing the curious sand, their toxic embrace. Landmarks we once celebrated are now unrecognizable. The Golden Gate Bridge sags halfway into the bay. Its towers collapsed under the weight of corrosion and seismic jolts. New York's Statue of Liberty tilts, half In a brackish harbor that rose 3 meters before the levees finally buckled, small towns before glorious odes to Amerikaner now villages of rusted signage and boarded-up storefronts, their main streets reclaimed by tumbleweeds and scavenger tracks. And what of civilization? The government fractured long ago under the combined pressure of resource wars and environmental bankruptcy. Federal convoys still patrol major highways, but only sporadically, and they're as likely to plunder as they are to protect. In their wake, survivor groups have sprouted like fungus, some band together under banners proclaiming hope and order. Malls and gas stations. A handful of scientists have holed up in underground labs, broadcasting whispered bulletins about drought-resistant crops and water filtration, if you can hear them over the static dot out here. Time has lost its meaning. Dawn bleeds into day with the same jaundiced hue, and dusk offers no comfort, only an intensifying swarm of insects that descend in clouds, so thick you can't see your hand in front of your face. They blanket the broken asphalt, the dead brush, the skeletal rooftops, seeking any warmth. Their wings hum a constant dirge. You learn to move silently, to hold your breath, to wait for the swarm to pass. Yet even amidst this desolation, is it another swath of ash carried by gale winds, a band of raiders pressing for dwindling supplies, or, just maybe, a sliver of rain cloud promising relief? We cling to those moments, the rumor of water pooling in an underground cistern, the word of a safe passage through scorched farmland, because hope, fragile as it may be, is the only currency that still holds value. This is the world I'm broadcasting from, a shattered panorama of fire and drought, of flooded ruins and frost-killed forests, a place where every landmark is a ghost, every institution a memory, and survival is a feat of sheer will. I don't know what tomorrow brings, only that I'll be here to report it, static and all. Keep listening, keep surviving, because even in this wasteland, the human voice remains our most powerful weapon against oblivion. I'm Miles Harrington, though out here names mean little. I use my real one because if this transmission ever reaches another soul, I want them to know exactly who's speaking. I'm the voice on the radio, the one threading static into something like company. Once, I was a reporter for the Morning Chronicle, chasing headlines about celebrity divorces and sports scores. Now I chase survival, the glaring headlines writ across scorched earth and parched rivers dot every dawn. I grease the pedal generator that powers these mics and this ancient transmitter. My camp is built inside the skeletal remains of an old broadcast tower on East Ridge, where the wind howls like the ghosts of old broadcasts. I siphon diesel from abandoned school buses to keep a small cache warm through the bitter nights. I've rigged a solar panel array on the tower's roof, feeding trickles to my battery bank. Though most days the haze blots out the sun, mid-morning I scout for supplies. I strap on my gas masks, mandatory or the dust chokes you on head, toward the ghost town a mile west. The streets there are buried in ash. Rusted cars lie half swallowed by drifting dunes. I pick through grocery stores looted years ago, hunting the miraculous still good cans, peaches in light syrup, kidney beans, even sardines, if I'm lucky. Water comes from a scavenged 55-gallon drum I found buried beneath collapsed boards in an old diner. I run it through my jury-rigged charcoal and sand filter. then boil it over a solar cooker when the sun breaks through. Every movement is cautious. Every snapped twig could summon the swarm. But I've learned the quiet of creaking rust and shifting ash. I move like a shadow. When I return, I ration my water to 2 liters a day and cut the sunlight off my skin as much as possible. The UV burns harder now. Nighttime brings predators, wolves grown bold for lack of prey, and human scavenger gangs who'll kill for a fistful of food bars. I keep my rifle loaded, but I avoid confrontation whenever I can. Better to hide than to fight. Why do I keep talking into this transmitter? Because people need to know they're not alone. In the early days, when the grid collapsed and the insects came, panic ripped communities apart. Neighbors turned on neighbors. I witnessed mothers leave children behind to save their own skins. I heard someone break into my parents' home for a loaf of bread. I lost them both, my father in a gunfight at the gas station, my mother on a crossing between survivor camps. We never found each other in the chaos, but I've also seen small miracles. A stranger who shared her meager rations, a hidden spring where we drank until our bellies ached, the glint of moonlight on someone's tear-stained face when I guided them to safety. That spark is why I pedal this generator day after day, to remind myself that hope exists, however faint, and to pass. That reminder on if someone hears me and thinks maybe there's still something worth fighting for, then every scraped knee and sleepless night has been worth it. I carry my losses in every joint that aches from the cold, in every tremor when I hold the rifle. Too long at night, I dream of my daughter Della, 6 years old, her hair the color of wheat and a freckle on her nose. I picture her swinging on a tire swing in our backyard before the storms came. In those dreams, the world is still whole. Then I wake to the droning swarm and the taste of dust, and the ache returns. Loneliness is a constant companion. I fashioned a mannequin from old clothes, propped in the corner of my shack, and named her Nora. I know it's absurd, but speaking to her while I tune frequencies keeps my voice steady. It's a reminder that I'm still human, that words matter. In the rare moments when I hear another voice crackle through the static, I drop everything to respond. Even if it's a prank or a broken signal, I answer. Because to be heard and to hear another is the most precious exchange left. I think back to a time when the sunrise was soft and golden, not this sickly orange glow that scars everything it touches. I remember rushing to cover stories, celebrity weddings, sports finals, stock market crashes. Now, the only crash I witness is the collapse of civilization. I'm haunted by reporters I knew, colleagues who didn't make it past the first year of droughts, wildfires, and food riots. Sometimes I feel guilty for surviving when they didn't. But guilt is another chain. I refuse to be bound. Yet there are moments when resilience flares bright. I found a single green shoot pushing through a crack in the tower's concrete besa. Stubborn weed, tenacious against all odds. I watered it. I built a terrarium around it with shards of broken glass to protect it from the wind. Every morning I check on that sprout, and as it grows, I'm reminded that life bends toward hope. Last week, I salvaged a battered shortwave set from a looted emergency supply cache. I spent 3 nights soldering. When I turned it on, I caught a fragment of a broadcast, someone reading poetry. their voice trembling with relief. I don't know who they are or where they're broadcasting from, but I'm tracking it now. If they're out there, alive and broadcasting beauty into this broken world, that's proof enough for me. Proof that the human spirit still sings. I, A.M. Miles Harrington, survivor and storyteller. This is my reality. A world of dust and ash, but also of pedal-powered mics and ragged hope. I confess my fears and share my tactics, all in the hope that someone, somewhere, can use these words to endure. My losses weigh heavy, but every day I choose to rise on to speak, because even in the darkest static, a single word can light the way. Keep listening, keep breathing. We're not finished yet. I haven't slept through a full night in months. If you can call dozing off with a shotgun clutched to your chest sleep, each time I drift, I'm jolted awake by the memory of that first wave, an endless black cloud swelling over the ridgeline, blotting out the stars. I hit the emergency switch on my transmitter and speak into the mic before fear choked me. They're here. This is no ordinary plague of locusts. These insects what researchers still call Schizomoptera magnificar, the grotesque offspring of a planetary imbalance. Rising temperatures accelerated their breeding cycles. Years without freezing winters let eggs hatch en masse. Pesticide stocks dwindled as supply lines broke. The chemicals we deployed only bred resistance, leaving survivors stronger and more voracious. Tonight, they advance under a crimson moon, a screaming tide of mandibles and wings. They travel in pulses, wave after relentless wave. Each insect barely the size of your thumbnail, but together they form a living storm cloud. Wing beats number in the thousands per second, creating a droning roar that rattles your bones. If you're unlucky enough to be caught outside, you'll feel them battering your clothes and skin. Tiny impacts like hail mixed with needles. They seek out warmth, and carbon dioxide, our breath, is their beacon hand. They'll attempt to crawl into every crack and crevice, under door frames, inside vents, behind your eyelids. Every day, the swarm grows. Their breeding grounds expand into the scorched-out hollows of dried riverbeds, in evaporated wetlands, thick with algae blooms. With each cycle, they eat everything green, seedlings, shrubs, even the hardy rootstock of invasive tumbleweed. Without vegetation, soils erode. Once fertile farms become dust bowls that send choking plumes across the plains. Monsoon rains now carry pesticide-laden runoff into ghost towns, poisoning the few aquifers we can still pump. Our fuel reserves have shriveled to the last national refinery in Colorado went offline when its storage tanks were infested beetle larvae consumed. The plastic seals. Now, I harvest diesel from abandoned rigs and siphon kerosene from museum-grade lanterns. At best, I can keep my generator running for 3 hours a night. Any longer, and the noise draws the scavenger gangs. Food is measured in calorie bars, and the occasional stash of freeze-dried rations scrounged from a National Guard cache. Even those are dwindling. My body has adapted to a perpetual state of mild dehydration and near starvation conditions engineered by nature to break you unless you fight back. Climate models from before the collapse warned of ecosystem collapse, but no one truly believed. Those C-SPAN briefings until the ground began to move beneath our feet. Rivers that once ran clear now resemble thick, rust-colored sludge. Aquifers tapped by deep wells taste of brine, and dissolved metal kidney stones surge. Each well has a projected lifetime. Mine has 3 months, maybe 4 if I ration aggressively. Society splintered under these stresses. Governments fell back to a patchwork of regionally controlled enclaves. Some, like the Northern Alliance, maintain martial law. They enforce ration, cards with armed patrols. Others free cities, like Aragon, operate on barter economies where bullets trade for beans. Rogue militias, the so-called Fang Collective, hunt migrants and forced laborers to harvest insect biomass, a twisted alchemy that converts chitin into crude oil substitutes. In many regions, the biological processing factories are run by warlords who dole out insect fuel to loyalists, leaving everyone else to die in the swarms. Here's what little data I've pieced together from salvage, early research logs, and a hastily scribbled thesis by Dr. Lena Ortiz at Y-32 degrees Celsius, P-90 degrees Fahrenheit. S. Magnifica completes its life cycle in 18 days instead of the historic 45. Summers now average 35 degrees Celsius across much of the continent, with heat domes trapping warmth for weeks on end. Without sub-zero winter's egg, diapause, the natural freezing pause fails to trigger. Instead of remaining dormant in winter mud, eggs hatch year-round. Widespread glyphosate use in the mid-2020s created cross-resistance to neonicotinoids, insecticides, that once worked now kill only 12% of each generation, insufficient to curb growth. Swarms maintain altitude at 500 to 1,500 meters by riding thermal updrafts. At night, they descend to the surface, seeking warmth. They navigate by polarized light and carbon dioxide gradients. Water, my reserved 200L in sealed barrels, runs low by day 45 if rationed. The nearest aquifer is 20 kilometers east. Transport means exposure. Rainfall last month totaled 12 millimeters, barely enough to wet the soil. Food, 3 bars of rut, 24 hours sustenance, cost 6 hours scouring abandoned markets. Hunting small game is pointless. Rabbits and rodents have vanished under the swarm's predation. Fuel, diesel yields 3 hours of generator runtime. My solar panels, coated in insect filth, operate at 15% efficiency. I clean them once a week, but that draws the swarm. Shelter. My broadcast shack is sealed with tar paper and insect. Mesh fine, enough to block beetles, but impossible to work in for more than 20 minutes without sweat drenching the mesh and inviting the next wave. Here's what I've learned, shared without ego, because knowledge is our only edge. If you're tuning in from somewhere beyond this ridge, take note. Build a low, smoky fire-dried dung or damp woodworks, best to create a dense, low-lying fog. Insects avoid the particulates and carbon monoxide. Position the fire wind of entry points to direct the smoke under eaves and doorways. Hang plastic bottles filled with yeast and sugar slurry near vents. As they ferment, they release carbon dioxide, drawing insects away from human breath. Replace weekly. Use window screen mesh secured with duct tape. Seal gaps with silicone caulk if you can find any. If mesh is unavailable, layers of cheesecloth. Help but double layer and drench in permethrin solution if you can source it. For best effect, set up a simple solar still, dig a pit, place a collection cup in the center, cover with plastic sheeting, and secure edges with rocks. Place a small stone in the center of the sheet, above the cup, so condensation drips inside. Yields 0.5 to 1 L per day, better than none. Eat your largest portion at dawn, when your energy stores will last longest through cool hours. Drink only when necessary. Overhydration without caloric intake risks hyponatremia. Run your generator at night in 3 1-hour spikes rather than a continuous 10-hour burn. It powers the transmitter and recharges batteries without droning constantly and attracting raiders. I've cataloged these tactics into a battered notebook, my equivalent of a field manual. But even the best defenses can be overrun. Yesterday, a rogue wind shear ripped through the valley, depositing a 2-kilometer-wide slab of swarm onto my camp. The mesh screen tore, the biker barrel stove toppled. I spent 4 hours crawling on my belly, flicking insects into the wind. I nearly lost consciousness in the suffocating cloud. Tonight's forecast: temperatures holding at 33 degrees Celsius, humidity at 42%, and wind gusts rising to 25 kilometers per hour from the southeast, prime conditions for a mass descent. In other words, the worst night yet. I've sealed every crack, refilled the CO decoys, and positioned my smoke generators. But right now, I'm streaming this so that anyone within range can prepare to. I'm not alone in this. Across the broken battleground of what was once Midwestern farmland, I've exchanged signals with camps in Missouri and Nebraska. One group reported collapsing under food riots. Another clings to a 12-kilometer deep cave system that remains insect-free, at least for now. They feed on bat guano fungus and melt snow trickling from stalactites, but their numbers are small, and the fungus yields grim rations. Soldiers turned scavengers raid refugee columns, and families fracture under the strain. Children born into this world know only the hum of wings. Mental health cases spike PTSD, triggered by every scrape of an insect landing. Nightmares of being buried alive. Pharmacies are empty. Medicine is a myth. In the darkness, some turn to prayer, others to violence. Yet there are sparks of solidarity. A convoy in Iowa that shared water rations with a stranded school bus of refugees. A clandestine network of ham radio operators who trade instructions on insect mitigation in exchange for prayer chains. These flickers of cooperation shine brightest against the void. This swarm is more than an environmental disaster. A crucible testing our ingenuity, compassion, and will to survive. Every pulse of wings overhead reminds us that nature isn't simply a backdrop to human drama. It's a force that can and will remake the world on its own terms. I update my notes. Temperature sensors need calibration. I must reinforce the mesh on the generator vent and stock double doses of aspirin. Fever and dehydration will be the killers if the swarm abates only briefly. I glance east toward the low ridge, now wreathed in black. If you're listening, know this: barriers will fail, supplies will dwindle, and the nights will grow more feral. But share these tactics. Fortify your shelter. Conserve what you have. And above all, communicate. Because every broadcast, every signal, every shared tip is another thumbprint on the door of a new tomorrow one, where we learn to live alongside whatever the world hurls at us. I'll be back on the hour. Keep your Radio's tuned. The swarm is descending. I wake before dawn, long before the sky turns its jaundiced orange. My water barrel is down to 20 liters enough for 5 days if I ration expertly. I slide out of my sleeping bag and check the pedal generator. The mesh sealing the intake is frayed again. Last night's swarm rattled it like hail. I patched it with tape salvaged from an old road sign, knowing this jury-rigged seal won't last through another pulse of beetle clouds. Today's scavenging run feels different, more desperate. The grocery store 2 miles east was picked clean weeks ago, but I've learned there are blind spots, a back storeroom where looters overlooked the old can of peaches and a wheelbarrow of rice sacks. I stash my rifle, sling my pack, and head out under the low sun. Every step kicks up a cloud that coats my throat. By mid-morning, I glimpse the store's shattered windows, framed by blackened beams. Inside, my heart hammers inventory that might save me. I move slowly, sweeping my flashlight over overturned shelves, 2 cans of peaches, 3 packages of ramen, a bottle of iodine. I hesitate at the iodine, knowing I'll need it for water purification if I find a spring. Then I find it, a dented sack marked Heikel Soy Blend. It weighs 10 kilos. My breath catches this. Could be the difference between starvation and another week of strength. I load my pack and turn to leave, breathing easier until I hear the snap of wood behind me. My heart lurches. I freeze. A figure steps from the shadows. A man in scavenger's garb leather, jerkin, patched trousers, a rifle slung low. He's younger than me, eyes hard with suspicion. Hand over the sack, he says, voice low but edged with menace. I swallow. I need this, I whisper. Water's scarce. I'll trade you iodine, he snorts. I need the calories. No swaps. I step back. There's nothing else here. His finger tightens on the trigger. The barrel wobbles. I realize I've already slipped my water bottle holster off, giving him leverage. Attack from raiders. He jerks the rifle upward. Before he can fire, a shout echoes down the aisle. Drop the gun. A second scavenger emerges, taller, broader, wearing a makeshift breastplate of oil drums. She nods at me. Leave him. I don't hesitate. I sprint past the first raider, body low, and dash through the broken exit into the sunshine. I tear off south, hugging the building's shadow. Behind me, 3 dull cracks ring out bullets, hitting concrete. I don't look back until I'm 100 meters away. Heart pounding so hard, I think my chest will burst. I duck behind a collapsed phone booth and catch my breath. My pack is intact, but I taste blood biting my cheek in the sprint. I swipe it away and press on, driven by a mixture of fear and the sting of injustice. The world is hard enough. I'll be damned if I let a gunman take my lifeline. When I return to base, I radio out. This is Harrington. I've found soy blend and iodine in the old market got, ambushed by 2 raiders. If anyone can spare a guard detail for the next run, speak now, static. Then a crackling response. We'll send 2. Hold tight. It's Lucia, leader of the Ridge Watch, camp 3 miles west. She's a former National Guard lieutenant who's sequestered her group in a fortified dairy barn. We've traded basics before batteries for cornmeal, but I've never asked for backup. This crisis forces cooperation. 2 hours later, I hear their vehicle rumble over the ridge, an armored pickup topped with sandbags and steel plating. Sergeant Ruiz and Private Jensen hop out, rifles at the ready. They inspect the mesh on my generator and offer tools I haven't had in months. A roll of heavy-duty sealant and a coil of wire mesh. In exchange, I offer half the soy blend and iodine. Deals this straightforward feel almost foreign. That afternoon, the sky darkens unexpectedly. A dust storm and inland hurricane of soil sweeps down the valley. The wind shrieks through broken windows, lifting sheets of metal and flinging debris across the camp. Ruiz orders everyone inside and doubles the tarps over the vents. I crank the generator to life, powering our small lights and the radio. Jensen reads out storm data from a salvaged NOAA tablet. Wind speeds approaching 80 kilometers per hour. Visibility dropping below 10 meters. The storm will last at least 6 hours. Inside the shack, the walls tremor. The dust infiltrates every seam. I taste it on my tongue. I hold a damp cloth over my mouth and listen to the wind's roar. For a moment, I feel the weight of the world, pressing down like the sky is trying to crush us all. But then, I hear laughter. Lucia teasing Jensen about missing his ex-girlfriend. They've known each other since basic training, I gather. The small ripple of humor in the claustrophobic shelter reminds me why I broadcast. Connection is survival after the storm. The air clears enough to scan the horizon. From the tower, I catch a sliver of movement near the abandoned reservoir bed. 2 valleys over, I swing my binoculars. A column of dust, like a distant pilgrimage. Footpath. The reservoir dried up years ago. The group that passed here must be heading toward something not away. That evening, Lucia and I pore over an old topo map I salvaged. There's a note in the margin, scrawled in faded ink. Schooner Spring 500 meters below dam. Fresh water. Coordinates on reverse. I flip the map. The dam, once part of a hydroelectric project, lies half collapsed, a rusted spine calling out from the cracked earth. The spring. If it still flows, we could tap a steady source of water, enough to supply both camps. If we can make the trek and breach the dam. I lie awake that night, staring at the ceiling of corrugated steel. Half of me aches to follow the plan, immediately secure water, bolster our defenses. The other half whispers warnings. Schooner Spring could be a myth. Coordinates could be wrong. You could lead everyone into an ambush. I think back to the raider ambush in the store. A single man lying in wait. What if the note is a trap, set by a militia, hoping to lure desperate scavengers into a kill zone? I taste the soy blend I've stashed under my blanket bitter, chalky. I press my hand to the locket my daughter gave me before the collapse. A tiny photo of her smiling cheeks, dust-smudged. She believed I'd find her again, that we'd pick each other out of the chaos. If I turn back, I'll betray that faith. If I lead a march to a phantom spring, I risk all of us by dawn. I've decided. I gather Lucia, Ruiz, Jensen, and 3 of Lucia's best scouts. We pack enough fuel to power the generator once we're at the dam, and ration water carefully each. Person allotted 1.5 liters for the 5-hour trek. I hand them iodine and filtration kits. They nod, faces grim but determined. As we step out, the wind kicks up, again lingering gusts from last night's storm. Dust coats our gear. The taste of grit fills our mouths. We move in single file across the flat, cracked expanse that was once farmland. The sun climbs merciless, baking us. 2 kilometers in, Jensen falters, stumbling as heat cramps seize his legs. Lucia kneels beside him. Drink, rest, move on. He downsips his ration, grimacing, and we press forward. Halfway to the dam, Lucia freezes. She holds up her hand. We halt. In the distance, a convoy of 3 dune buggies screeches out of a wash, kicking up a wall of dust. They fly the Fang Collective's emblem, a black fang over red. These are the warlords who harvest insect biomass and enslave outsiders. There are 7 of them, machine gun barrels glinting. They're rounding up laborers caught trying to sneak water from the reservoir when it still held a trickle. We're exposed, no cover for 50 meters. Lucia whispers a plan. Flank them from above on the rocky escarpment, but that burns extra fuel and wastes daylight. I glance at the Groupian's face, contorted with heat. My heart hammers. Do we risk battle for a chance at water, or retreat and let the Fang claim the spring for themselves? I draw in a ragged breath. We can't back down, not when water's on the line. My voice sounds strange in my helmet. Lucia lowers her rifle. All right, move, fast, quiet. We spread out in a loose V formation and ascend the ridge. The Fang convoy hasn't noticed us yet. Their horns echo off the parched earth as they herd prisoners' ragged figures in stained tunics. Adrenaline surges. My pulse pounds so loud I can't hear my own breathing. With Lucia on my right and Ruiz on my left, we crest the ridge and open fire. Bullets rip through air and metal. The Fang scramble drivers leap from their buggies, raising weapons. One of Lucia's scouts falls, a round in her side. She collapses with a soft cry. Ruiz sprints back to drag her behind boulders. The prisoners scatter, and I shout over the din. Head for the dam. Chaos reigns. I'm reloading as a roar. Behind me signals more vehicles approaching. We're outnumbered and unarmored. Still, something ignites in me, the thought of cooling water after days of rationed sips, of a steady source to build something more than shacks and scavenged cans. I grip the radio mic and transmit. All units fall back to dam coordinates. Now, we fight our way across the broken spillway, twisted steel girders around us. The sun beats down as if it wants us dead. Lucia's scout calls out, too many. We abandon gear, we abandon caution, and we run legs pumping, lungs burning. I glance back. The Fang are in pursuit, but dust and distance blur their shapes. Ahead, I see the dam's crest half collapsed, but a wall nonetheless. If the spring lies below, we'll find it. I collapse against the crumbling concrete, squad huddled around. My pack is gonna lost in the skirmish, but I feel no despair. We survived. We reached the objective. I look at Lucia, blood on her sleeve, and we share a nod. This is only the beginning of our fight. The mystery of the spring beckons. Whether it's salvation or another trap, we'll face it together. I grab the mic. This is Harrington. We've secured coordinates, heading into the breach. If this transmission cuts out, know we fought for every drop. Keep listening, and then I'll be back as soon as I can. The wind sighs across the dam's ruins. Beyond it lies the unknown, cold water seeping from rock or a dry crypt of shattered hopes. My heart pounds with equal parts dread and anticipation. In this world, miracles hide in the harshest places, so do the deadliest traps. But I've chosen to see possibility over fear. The next chapter begins at the water's edge. Keep your radios close. We're striking for survival. I crouch at the edge of the crumbling spillway, sweat stinging my eyes as I peer over the dam's fractured lip. Below, in the shattered concrete basin, water trickles thin, hesitant streams, seeping from fissures like reluctant tears. For a heartbeat, the world falls silent. No wind-blasted dust, no insect chorus, only the soft hiss of leaking life. Here, Lucia whispers, her voice trembling. She points to a jagged opening in the lower wall where emerald water glints in the dying light. The scent hits me first, faint, sweet tang of fresh water, stark against the stench of decay. I cup my hand and dip it into the pool. It flows cool and clear, washing away the grit of months in the wasteland around us. The others gather. Jensen, with his jammed leg brace, Sergeant Ruiz with bandaged forearm, and Lucia's scout, Mara, face streaked with grime and relief. Each of us tastes that first sip as though it were ambrosia. I let the water dribble down my throat, feeling life stir in my veins, like rain coaxing grass from scorched earth. But hope is never free of peril. Far below, I spot movement, figures emerging from the shadows cast by the collapsed turbines. The Fang Collective. They've tracked us here. I slam my fist against the wall. We need to dam this leak. Now, I shout. But as I turn, I hear the distant rev of engines. The raiders are bringing heavy equipment. They'll divert the spring to their biomass refinery and leave us to rot in that moment. I face my worst fear, conquer the spring for my camp and broadcast, the coordinates to the world, or sabotage it to keep it from the Fang sacrificing our only water source to deny our enemy. I think of Ella's freckled face, of the locket in my pocket. Would I betray this miracle to protect others whom I'll never meet? Or do I choose my ragged band's survival over a greater good? Above ominous clouds gather the storm we avoided near the reservoir is barreling toward us. Lightning flashes, netting the sky in electric white. Wind whips dust through the broken arches of the dam. If the storm breaks before we secure the spring, the debris will clog the fissure, or worse, the wall will collapse, burying our chance under tons of rubble. We have minutes, maybe seconds. I draw in a shuddering breath and grab the radio mic. Harrington here. We've found fresh water. Coordinates locked. Broadcast on every frequency in 5 minutes. Get your people here. But if any Fang units approach, I authorize immediate sabotage of the outlet. No compromise. My fingers tighten around the mic, the lifeline between us and every survivor tuning in. I click off Lucia and I sprint down a narrow maintenance tunnel to the forced flow valve deep in the dam's guts. Jensen limps at our heels, while Ruiz and Mara climb above to set up warning flares. Water drips from the ceiling, slippery on the concrete, but we press on. At the valve, I wrench off the corroded cap, revealing the mechanism that once throttled turbine flow. Now it controls our only hope. I jam a makeshift sealer strip of rubber and scrap metal into the valve seam. It holds, for now. Every turn of the wheel cracks with ancient rust. Finally, a hiss drops to a steady drip. Enough water will pour into our lined troughs, while the rest seeps back underground. We race back into the open as thunder cracks overhead. Above, the Fang are already at the spring, rifles blazing. Their shouts ring through the dusk. Lucia opens fire, her rounds pinging off concrete. Ruiz joins her, and Mara sweeps the perimeter. I grab Jensen's shoulder and pull him back to cover behind a turbine pedestal. Dots sprint up the spillway, slipping on gravel and moss to the antenna mast where I left the transmitter humming. My heart hammers in my ears as I flip the power switch, static at first, then a cascade of voices survivors scanning every channel, desperate for a lifeline. I tighten my grip, lean into the microphone, and speak with the full weight of everything I've endured. This is Miles Harrington. We've secured a fresh spring beneath the schooner dam at these coordinates: 38.745 N, 95.31 to W. Bring your filters, your jerrycans, your hopes, but be warned, forces hostile to our cause known as the Fang Collective are converging on this site. If you arrive before us, we will activate the sabotage valve to protect this water from exploitation. It is life or death for all of us. Make your choice. Join in solidarity, or let this spring die with tyranny. I've chosen my side. What about you? I hold the mic at arm's length, watching the glow of radio tubes pulse. The rain begins to fall, acidic droplets sizzling on hot metal. In the lightning flash, I catch a glimpse of the Fang's silhouette. They charge down the slope, monstrous in the flicker. I feel the crack in my soul split wide. This moment choosing to share our discovery, despite the risk, defines why I survived this long. Not for myself, not for a single camp, but for the spark that ignites when strangers realize they're not alone. My voice cracks, but I force it steady. If you answer my call, help us hold the dam. If you can't come, don't broadcast these coordinates to the wrong ears. Let the water flow free, or let it be lost forever. I slam the mic down and race toward the spring, storm rain plastering my hair to my scalp. Lucia cuts off Fang raiders in a burst of gunfire. Ruiz barricades the main tunnel. Mara directs our small group, guiding refugees who arrived as the broadcast went live 10. 15 souls, armed with civilian rifles and hope in their eyes. The Fang press their advantage, pushing through the barricades. I reach the fissure and see the spring flooding our catchment channel. The water level rises, clear and life-giving. Below, the ground shakes a tremor larger than any quake we've felt before. The dam settles beneath our feet, threatened by rain-soft earth. The Fang captain, a hulking figure in chitin reinforced armor, raises his rifle. "Stop this now or die," he roars. I step forward, soaked to the bone, water dripping from my sleeves. Behind me, survivors, close ranks. Some hold torches, others level rifles. I meet his glare without flinching. "You're too late," I say, voice echoing over the roar of water and storm. The spring belongs to everyone who will fight for it. Lightning cracks, illuminating the standoff. I raise my mic like a banner. The Fang hesitates, plit. In that moment, our ragged, alliance-defeated troops, scavengers, refugees, surges forward, not for conquest, but to protect life itself. Gunfire and shouts blend with thunder. I don't watch the outcome. I turn to the spring and see the water, pooling deeper, greener in the stormlight. Even if we lose this fight, that water is free, flowing toward fertile ground below, nourished by earth and human defiance. I press the mic once more. Hold fast. This is our turning point. We either reclaim this world or watch it wash away. A deafening crash part of the dam wall collapses upstream, sending a surge of water down the channel. The new current carries debris, but also hope, seeds we scattered a week ago, now carried toward soil that still remembers growth. I close my eyes and smile through the rain. The battle rages, but I know what choice I've made. Not to cling to this spring alone, but to share it, to let life flow through broken lands. This is the climax of our struggle. We take a stand, not just for survival, but for solidarity in a world that has forgotten both. And as thunder rolls across the valley, I realize the real turning point wasn't the spring at all, but the moment we chose each other over fear. That choice will outlast any dam, any storm, any swarm. And in that choice, we find the beginning of our next chapter. The rain finally eased to a drizzle by dawn, leaving the spring's channel slick with mud and debris. We stood in the half-light, gasping in the chill, surrounded by a ragged assembly of survivors, refugees, Ridgewatch fighters, and even a handful of former Fang Collective laborers who'd switched sides when they saw water flowing for everyone. Under the collapsed dam, the pooled spring water shimmered a surreal emerald dour hard-won prize. Then the hours that followed, we fortified the breach point with sandbags and scavenged steel plates. Lucia organized shifts to guard the channel, while Ruiz rigged improvised pump salvaged from the turbine, housing to redirect water into lined trenches that fed our camps uphill. Mara and Jensen worked with the refugees to lay lengths of plastic sheeting as makeshift piping. By midday, fresh water trickled through the network, pooling at collection sites where women and children waited with empty jerrycans. The Fang Collective never fully regrouped. Their armored units retreated under heavy fire and the unforgiving storm, leaving behind abandoned weapons and a skeleton crew to demoralize to continue. Word of our broadcast stand of the spring's liberation spread within hours, as radios crackled with new arrivals asking for coordinates. Ridgewatch scouts intercepted Fang deserters bearing tales of our united front. Mothers laughed as their children splashed at the water's edge. Men who'd gone days without a proper drink embraced the channel gratefully, letting the cool rush clear their lungs. I joined them, kneeling at the trough and cupping handfuls to my parched lips. For a moment, the ache that had nestled in my bones since the first swarm pulse when the world turned on its head lifted, but reality reasserted itself as the chill seeped through my jacket, reminding me that tomorrow would bring its own demands. We had water enough for cooking, drinking, and even small irrigation trials, but our stores of food, fuel, and medical supplies remained scant. The soy blend would last 2 weeks at best. Our water filters needed replacement. The spring's yield fluctuated, dipping whenever the next storm's runoff dislodged silt into the fissures. Sediment clogged our makeshift pumps, forcing Jensen and Mara to spend hours hacking ice-cold sediment out by hand. I watched them work, shivering in the damp dawn mist, and thought back to the early broadcasts from this tower days when I barely scraped together a liter of filtered rainwater. Back then, every word I spoke was laced with fear that no one would answer. Now, dozens of voices on the other end of the ether echoed, trading tactics and solidarity. That collective hum steadied something in me I'd thought lost. I found myself pausing at odd moments, listening to the rush of fresh water, catching the faint echo of children's laughter or scanning the sky for the next swarm wave. The fear was still there, a low buzz under everything, but it no longer ruled me. I realized I'd grown accustomed to danger grown stronger because of it. My priorities had shifted from mere survival to stewardship, broadcasting not just warnings, but guidance on how to cultivate this fragile oasis and protect it from future threats in the quiet hours. I also confronted guilt. I thought of the Fang deserters who'd turned coat, motivated mostly by preservation. Some had tried to sabotage our pumps in the early skirmishers, surrendered, offering to repair what they'd broken. Should we trust them? Could I, who once withheld coordinates to protect the spring, now embrace forgiveness? I saw the lines on Lucia's face as she listened to me wrestle with this decision. She'd lost friends to Fang raids, yet she nodded when I proposed giving them a chance under strict watch. The land around Schooner Dam had begun to show subtle signs of recovery, where we channeled excess water into a small plot at the dam's crest. The first green sprouts of alpine sedge took hold. We scattered seeds of drought-resilient grasses, harvested from a decommissioned seed vault in Ridgewatch, Custodian. A brittle tapestry of vegetation emerged, holding soil where erosion once gouged deep gullies. But nature's pendulum still swung toward collapse in other ways. Distant thunderheads warned of a new dust storm brewing beyond the western ridge. Scouts reported that the swarms had shifted their migratory patterns, drawn by our freshwater's vapor plume. We fortified mesh screens around the channel, but the guard shifts grew more grueling as the swarm season intensified. Pesticides were ineffective only. The smokescreen tactics and carbon dioxide decoys we'd developed kept the insects at bay for a few hours each night. I found my own sense of purpose evolving. I anticipated my broadcasts would soon shift from emergency bulletins to educational segments, how to build solar stills, set up CO decoys, and select resilient seed varieties. I drafted schedules for water rationing boards and intercamp councils to oversee equitable distribution. My role had become less lone voice in the static and more coordinator of a fledgling network of communities. Yet a deeper change had taken root, a willingness to hope not as a defiant rebellion against despair. I'd once believed that hope was a luxury we could not afford, that it left us vulnerable. Now I saw hope as fuel, something that powered ingenuity and forged alliances. When Lucia asked me if I'd consider a permanent radio relay station at the dam, expanding our reach, I agreed without hesitation still. Uncertainty loomed. One miscalculation, too much diverted. Water or too large a swath of crop scood collapsed the spring's delicate balance. Rumors swirled of new Fang factions recruiting far to the north, consolidating power with illicit insect biomass refineries. We had no guarantee Schooner Spring would remain ours indefinitely. That night, I sat on a rusted pipe and opened my battered notebook. By lamplight, I documented the day's yields: 450 liters collected, 350 liters rationed, 50 liters reserved for emergency reserves. I sketched improvements for the pump filters and noted strategies for fortifying new fire breaks around the channel. My hand trembled, not from fear, but from anticipation, a cocktail of exhaustion and exhilaration. As I closed the notebook, I heard the distant strains of a makeshift choir voices raised in song by survivors. gathered around a smoldering bonfire near the reservoir's empty bed. They sang old folk tunes and improvised lyrics about rebirth and resilience. Their melody drifted through the air, mingling with the hiss of water and the low hum of the generator. I closed my eyes and let it fill me. The line between disaster and recovery was razor thin, but tonight, at least, the scales tipped toward renewal. The world outside remained fractured swarm storms, rogue warlords, dwindling resources, but here, at this dam, we'd carved out a moment of grace. Tomorrow, I would broadcast the dam's coordinates again, standing by my vow to share our discovery. I would convene an intercamp council, draft new supply-sharing agreements, and schedule training sessions in sustainable water management. I would teach the children how to plant those sedge sprouts, ensuring they understood that the green ribbon would take years to thicken into grass. And with crisis, our shared voice is louder. We're no longer isolated pockets of survivors. We're a network bound by necessity, guided by hope, and galvanized by a single spring that proved even the most broken structures can give life if we dare to breach them. The dust had settled in some places, but in others it still swirled on the wind. The scars on the earth would remain for centuries, yet I stood by the water's edge and saw ripples of possibility. Children splashing, sprouts unfurling, radios alive with conversation. I found the quiet assurance that while the apocalypse may rewrite the rules, it cannot erase our capacity to rebuild. I dipped a hand into the channel once more, letting the cool water snake through my fingers. I closed my eyes and listened. The soft gurgle of the spring, the murmur of voices, and the steady beat of my own heart, of a world that still dared to flow. I stand atop the shattered crest of Schooner Dam, rain-slicked and bone-tired, watching the channel's emerald ribbon flow steadily into our camps below. The storm has passed, but its echoes linger awash of muddy water, uprooted saplings, and a horizon smudged with distant insect clouds. Even victory tastes of ash and rust tonight, but it is victory nonetheless. Hope is fragile in these hours. I've seen men and women weep at the edge of the channel tears, born of relief so profound it broke through months of skeletal survival. I've heard children laugh as they chased water-skipping stones across the concrete spillway, their joy a sharp contrast to the gloom that clings to every other corner of this broken landscape, remains unhealed. The dam is a fragile, half-collapsed monument to human hubris, now repurposed as our lifeline. Upstream, the rain-scarred hills shed silt that clogs our pumps. Downstream, the spring's headwaters are vulnerable to siege. The Fang Collective's retreat was temporary. They'll regroup, rearm, and try again. Beyond the ridge, swarms still pulse in waves, blotting out the sky and testing every mesh screen and smoke generator we can muster. Survival continues. I'll spend tomorrow drafting new broadcast segments, how to repair schist-clogged intakes, how to weave fiber mats from prairie grasses for bank reinforcement, how to inoculate cuttings of that alpine sedge to prevent erosion. I'll coordinate with camp leaders to form rotating patrols against raiders and schedule training for expanded. The Nebraska hollowers pass along crude desalination techniques gleaned from salt flat experiments. This relentless churn of planning and preparation is life now. There is no safe endpoint, no final chapter that closes with, and they lived happily ever after. I have learned that despair is easy. All you need do is stop peddling the generator, stop mapping supply lines, stop speaking into the mic. But today, I will not stop. Stay human. Keep fighting, even when your voice shakes, even when your hands tremble on the rifle barrel, even when the last embers of optimism curl into ash. What we've built at Schooner Dam is more than a water source. It's proof that cooperation across broken lines can yield life in the wasteland. I address the airwaves now as thunder rolls beyond the ridge. This is Miles Harrington, can sustain a network of communities. But know this, our channel is narrow, our defenses tenuous, and the world beyond remains hostile. If you cannot come, share these tactics: mesh sealing, smoke screening, pump maintenance. Keep your radios tuned. Keep your hope alive. In unity lies our greatest weapon against oblivion. I lower the mic and let the silence stretch first, an unbearable emptiness. Then a slow flood of replies as distant voices crackle in affirmation. Names I've never heard, camps I cannot yet locate. Hands extended on their sleeves, but smiles on their faces. I steel myself against the ache of gratitude, knowing it could crack open like a bone in my chest. I raise my hand in a silent salute, and Lucia meets my gaze with a nod that speaks of unspoken bonds. Forged in fire and water, we will rebuild. Not to the world as it once was, that world is gone forever, but to something new. A scattered archipelago of oases, linked by dialogue and shared purpose. We will teach children to plant gardens watered by this spring. We will map new springs beyond the dam. We will experiment with soil regeneration and solar-powered pumps. We will archive every failure as carefully as every success. Someday, a historian defo-satorians still exist, may find our broadcast logs and marvel that, in the face of climate collapse, insect swarms, and warlord brigades, a handful of strangers chose solidarity over solitude. They will read how one radio voice sparked a movement, how a single spring became a current of renewal, how the end of one world became the beginning of another. But that is a tale for another time, if time still exists. Tonight, I walk among the tents, checking lines, offering water, listening to whispered plans. I pause at the edge of the campfire, where survivors share stories of loved ones lost and dreams still kept alive. Because in this world, every sunrise brings its own emergency, every dusk its own peril. And through it all, our only weapons are ingenuity, empathy, and the stubborn decision to live as one. I do not know what tomorrow holds, only that I will greet it. I will crank the generator, tighten the mesh, broadcast our bulletins, and listen for your voices. We have water today, but tomorrow we will need more stores, more defenses, more alliances. So let this be our final credo. Hope is fragile, but it is stronger than fear. It lives in every shared drop of water, in every repair patched by weary hands, in every static-filled transmission that says, I am here. Are you? Stay alive. Stay human. Keep the current flowing. The world may be gone, but we remain. And as long as we breathe, we write our own ending.